All right, class. I want to make this video because I was helping some people today, and I could just see there's some real issues happening right now, and some just really basic things I think that aren't understood that make it very difficult to make any progress at all. Essentially, I think that some people are just sitting there for days, and staring at a screen and not making any progress, or worse yet, giving up and not even really thinking about it. But even though you're going to write a function that ultimately has this kind of signature on it, this is not the way I would go about trying to write it for most people. I wouldn't try to put it in a function to begin with. I think for most people, like, you're not quite clear enough. Well, I mean, especially if you're struggling a little bit, you're not quite clear on how the function works and how to use the function in a way that you can sort of iteratively develop your code. And that's kind of what I want to show you right now, is how you should like be going through this sort of piece by piece, right? So first things first is message and k, those parameters, they're just variables and they're just going to have values. So you can just create some variables and give them values, right? So here we go. I see a lot of people trying to use input. They want to use input right here, but then you have to type it in every time, and we're just here to test our code, right, and see what the value of our variables are, right? So I'm going to start out with be sure to drink your Ovaltine and k equals 13. The first thing I think would be a good thing to do is like say, well, I need to be able to go through every single letter in the message, right? So for letter in message, or maybe even char would be better, to be honest. But let's print letter, okay? And yeah, let's run this thing. Run it and see what happens. And here's what I get. I get every single letter from the message on a new line. It's not that exciting, but it's a start, right? It's a start. And I'm able to essentially isolate each value, isolate each letter value in the string. Okay, great. Well, you were told about this function called ord, right, which gives the ordinal value of the number. Well, let's see what happens when I use that function on each letter in the string, right? So let's run this little bit of code, and we get a bunch of stuff here. Now notice that I am getting, it's a long thing that prints out every time, getting a lot of different values and stuff like that. I mean, if I really wanted to, I might just go, from the beginning, might just go, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll add that be sure to drink your Ovaltine later. Let me just work with that. Just have a few things to look at and a few things to consider, right? Again, just running it again. I'm gonna run it again, see what happens. Okay, well, take a look at this. B, and then I get 66. E, and then I get 101. Space 32. S 115. U 117. R. Okay. Well, we were told about the ASCII table, so now might be an interesting time to look up the ASCII table and see that, yeah, capital B's ASCII value is 66, E's is 101, etc. So we're getting the ASCII value of our letters. Well, what are we supposed to do in the Caesar cipher? We're supposed to shift each letter by the k value, right? So what would happen now that I have a number value, right? What happens if I print out that plus k, right? So the next thing I'm going to try to print out, right? And so B, okay, so 66 becomes 79. All right, well, the shift was 13. Okay, that makes sense. 101 becomes 114. Okay, space becomes 45, etc. This is actually really revealing right here. But maybe I don't catch it at first. Maybe I don't realize the issue. But 115 becomes 128. 117 becomes 130. 114 becomes 127. The problem with that ultimately is that lowercase z is 122, and so what we're doing is we're going beyond the range of our lowercase values. Okay, but let's pretend I didn't know that, and I say, okay, well, I have these new ordinal values, right? Well, I want to turn them back into letters, so how about I print out the chur of this value? Maybe this is getting a little confusing, but hopefully, again, because you're seeing it iteratively developed, you kind of understand why this is what we need to put inside the char function, right? Because ordered letter plus k is actually just, it's a value, right? It's an ASCII value. All right, let's take a look at this. So B 66 becomes 79, becomes O. Okay, E 101, 114 becomes R. Okay, good, that's what we want. Space 32 becomes 45, becomes dash. Well, when I look at the way the solution is supposed to look, that space is not supposed to change and become a dash, right? So this is something I'm going to have to figure out. Right? That's not expected. Okay. S 115, 128 looks like there's some sort of space thing there, another space thing, and a weird symbol, whatever, and etc. So it's like, well, what's S supposed to be? S is actually supposed to be F, right? What's U supposed to be? I think U is supposed to be H. And then E, or E is fine, but R is probably supposed to be, E. So, bottom line is, I would then look at these values, right? And so if 128 is supposed to be F, what is that? It's 102. If U is supposed to be H, what is that? That's 104. If R is supposed to be E, what is that? That's 101, right? So it shouldn't take me too long to figure out that there's a 26 relationship between the value I'm getting and the value that I want to have, right? And that sort of makes sense. Like there's an alphabet, right? There's an alphabet, 26 letters in the alphabet. So I need to go back by 26 in order to get to where I want to be. So that's the kind of effect of looping around. And then I have to say, well, when is that? When is that? So for me, that is, that is when I have, where I'm seeing the problem is when I have a lowercase letter and the ordinal value of the letter plus k goes past the ordinal value of z, which is 122. That's when I'm having the problem, right? So how do I define that situation, right?
Anthony,
and for me first,
Chris,
you need something?
Don Juan, please come to attendance. Anthony, Reed,
For me first,
Chris,
I'd want
Don
to
Juan,
state
please come
that
to
I have a
attendance.
lowercase letter, right? And lowercase is between the range of 97 and 122. Okay, so if I'm sitting there with the cursor's blinking, right, that means that the ordinal value of letter is between 97 and 122, right? That means it's a lowercase letter, okay? And the problem I have is when that value plus the shift goes past 122, right? And I saw some people earlier today say if or letter greater than 122. Well, or letter is not going to be greater than 122. The letter itself is not going to be good, but when shifted, it might go past 122, right? And we just said that I actually want to bring that value back by 26 when it goes past 122, right? So that would be, I would want to say something like, I guess let's print out this whole thing. Let's just grab it. Let's grab it. Let's put it here. So I'm just saying before I chur it, I would want to subtract 26, right? And otherwise, right? Otherwise, I would just do what I normally do, right? Because it hasn't gone past the shift value. So I'm going to take out this little guy here for a sec, and let's run this code, okay? Now let's see what happens. Well, this S, right? That was our first problem, right? Which becomes 128, became F, right? Which is what we want. The U became H, which is what we want. The R became E, which is what we want. So that we're solving that problem now, right? Now, I will say one issue is I don't have a new string. I don't have a result to give, right? I'm not building anything here. I'm just changing values one by one, right? So one challenge I think I have right now is how do I hold on to these values? I'm creating the values I want as I go through the string, right? But how do I hold on to the values? You know, when you find yourself asking that kind of question, how do I hold on to values? You're saying I need to create a variable, right? I need to create a variable to hold on to these values. And the question is, what kind of variable do we use? How are we going to use that variable, etc.? Did you lose something?
Yeah, I've been looking for my stack of a bag of apples, and I checked my second period.
Okay. I didn't see it. Okay. So we need a variable, right? And the variable is going to store these string results, right? So that variable needs to be a string. Now maybe you don't intuitively kind of get this idea here, but this is like to me straight from coding that. We did like a double char exercise, very similar to this. You want an empty string that you can build the empty string onto, or build onto. So in order to like store these values, what we're going to do instead of printing them out here, basically, is we're going to take this thing here and we're going to say result is equal to result plus that thing, right? Plus this new letter we're getting. Okay. All right, so once again, let's run this again. Notice how many times, by the way, I've run this. And notice how like every time I make a change, I run something. Now, it ran just like it did last time. Right? There's no difference, okay? But I do have this variable called result. And because I ran it, Python is keeping track of that variable so that when I type in result, it will show me what result is. And result now looks like this, which isn't too bad, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. And if I type in something like be sure to drink your Ovaltine, and I have the expected result for that, let's try this one. Oopsie. What happened? Now let's see what result is. Interesting, and if you look at what the expected result is versus what this is, you'll see a lot of things match up. Right? A lot of things match up. Some things are not perfect, right? We still have work to do. And in reality, I've only checked to see for lowercase letters, right? Have I checked for uppercase letters and made a decision about what to do on uppercase letters? But what about things that are not lowercase or uppercase, right? They have sort of a different case. So this is, again, how I would approach it. I just wanted to make a short video on it, kind of explaining it to make people understand it better, but also just show you how to develop code, test code, just see the value of your variables, question what they are, try to test your code a little bit, see if the values that you're getting are the expected values, and then when they're not the expected values, ask yourself the question of why they aren't the expected values, and how you answer that question is you walk through the code, right? You're going to walk through the code line by line. You're saying, well, this letter was this value, and it went to here in the code. Now it's this value, and that's not the value I want it to be. I want it to be this value. Well, how do I get to be that value? So these are the kind of questions that you have to ask yourself, and how you have to iteratively develop the process. You should not be, we start to get to more complex stuff, you should not be trying to write the entire solution at once and then test it, right? You should be testing it constantly as you're developing, okay?